T.S. Eliot uses a phrase that's something like this. After we have studied the thing, we will find that we have returned home again for the very first time. It's interesting to me, those circle type of moments, how God very often brings us into relationships or connections, and we're not sure why, only to find out after we've come back full circle, oh, this was what that was about all the time. Most of the time, God is doing something in our lives that if we will give Him enough time, if we'll trust Him enough, if we'll be patient enough, He will bring us back to a place of understanding, and we'll be able to say, like Paul, I've learned to be content wherever I am, because wherever I am, I'm in the presence of God. Well, today's episode is something like that. I want to introduce you to a guest that is very much a full circle guest for me. I'm going to tell a story after I introduce him that'll kind of make all of that come clear. But I want us to talk about how God brings us back around after we've been through some of those wandering places to that home place for the very first time. This is Extending Branches. My name is Mike Courtney, and we welcome you to the episode When God Does a Full Circle Thing.
Welcome to Extending Branches, a mental health podcast committed to helping people recover hope, find healing, and experience growth. Extending Branches is a monthly podcast from Branches, a nonprofit dedicated to compassionate mental and emotional health care rooted in Christ-centered values. Your host is Dr. Mike Courtney, founder of Branches. He is an author, speaker, and pastoral counselor who leads honest conversations about faith, emotional health, and real-life growth. Before we jump in, a quick but important note. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a replacement for professional counseling. If you're struggling with suicidal thoughts or facing a mental health crisis, please reach out to a licensed professional or seek immediate help in your area. If you would like to learn more about Branches or explore support options, you can visit branches.org. We are really glad that you're here. Welcome to Extending Branches.
My guest today is Brad White. Brad is the men's minister at New Vision. He is also the associate pastor working with a great friend of mine, Brady Cooper. New Vision is one of the significant churches in our community, a mega church that impacts our place of residence like no other. And I'm excited to have Brad here for all of those reasons. But I'm also excited because of our returning back home together and some of the stories that we can share about that. So Brad, welcome.
This is exciting, Mike. Thanks for extending the invite. I got to be honest, when you called me and asked me about this, I was really just looking forward to catching up with you because we've had a lot of life together, and it's been a little while.
We have, and we said this earlier. We both talk about each other a lot.
True.
I'm referring people over there. I send men to the men's things.
Yeah.
We talk about each other a lot. We just don't talk to each other as much as we should.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm excited about this. It's going to be fun.
Hopefully this will be the first of many.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I invite you so I can ask you questions and hear your story. But I'm going to start with a story and see if you remember this. My wife and I had moved to Middle Tennessee. We had moved to Murfreesboro, and we were looking for churches. I'd been a pastor, and so we were really not used to going to churches that I wasn't directing. So we're looking for churches, and we went to 2 or 3 places. And finally we came home, and Josh said to me, my oldest son, he said, I would just like to go to church with somebody that I go to school with. And I said, okay, who do you go to school with that you like to go to church with? He said, well, I go to school with a guy named Jared White, and his father is a pastor. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, we'll go to church there. So we went to your dad's church on a Sunday. Great church, great group of people, great pastor. Everything was good. We're still wondering, I don't know, is this the church we're supposed to be in? And Jeff and Diane, your mom and dad, invite us to go out to lunch. I have 2 sons that are almost the same exact age as Pastor Jeff's 2 sons, Jared and Brad. And so we went out to eat, and I looked down at the end of the table, and Jared and Josh were leaning across the table just talking nonstop to each other. And Brad and Jacob were leaning across the table, just talking nonstop to each other.
Yep.
And at that moment, Brad, I said, this is the church where we're going to go. And we stayed there almost as long as you did. You all left about the time that we left. So
Yeah, that was the beginning of a really beautiful friendship.
Yeah,
honestly,
that's
and also it was also good as a PK when someone new showed up, because you knew you were going to get to go out for lunch. And obviously, Dad really liked y'all, because typically we were O'Charlie's. That was kind of the standard,
this was fancy. This is Parthenon.
he took you to the Parthenon.
Yeah,
so that
this
was. I mean, he knew something special was going to happen, I think.
Well, we looked far more impressive back then than we do now, so that wouldn't happen now. So
You know, I have a memory I'd like to share, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
So I remember Jacob and I, again, fast friends,
Uh-huh.
and he tells me, hey, my dad has let me buy paintball guns.
Uh-huh.
And as a 6th grade boy, like, this is the most exciting news I've ever heard. And he says, we want you to come over and play paintball. And so Pastor Chris, the youth pastor,
Right.
and myself, we come over and we're going to play paintball. We walk in, and the way that my memory brings it up, you're eating a sandwich,
Uh-huh.
and you had given, and I heard these explicit directions. You said to Jacob, do not touch the paintball guns. Of course, Jacob, being a 6th grade boy, is eager to show me how these things work, and he ends up somehow firing the paintball gun. It hits your ceiling, and then paint drips on your sandwich.
Yes, that's pretty vivid in my memory too. And I think to this day, Jacob shudders just a little bit at the mention of paintball.
That's a special story.
That's funny. That's neat. Your mom and dad and I became and remained very, very close friends, and we have done things together over the years. Probably just because of age difference. I haven't kept up with Jared as much. I haven't kept up with you as much. But your mom and dad are still very close to us, still very important to us. And so you're right. That started a family relationship that I hope, in all honesty, I hope that our children continue, that you have a chance to, I hope my grandchildren have a chance to shoot paintball guns in your house. And
I'd rather them not do that.
That's neat. So let's pick up from there.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing us back to that. Let's pick up from there. God was at work even then, even with I think when we started this with 3rd grade kids eating across from each other, and then 6th grade kids at the table, and God was at work even then. Where did God take you in that journey? You're obviously a great pastor now. Is that where you were headed? Did you know that's what you were going to do?
You know, it's such an interesting story. I was obviously just ingrained in the church, and I accepted Christ when I was young, and I felt called clearly by God when I think I was a sophomore in high school.
Okay.
I felt a call to vocational ministry all my life, and I think as most 16-year-old boys who kind of feel that prompting, I was like, well, I guess that means I'm going to be a youth pastor.
Yeah,
and
that's all
so
you know, right.
yeah, and so I graduated from Riverdale High School and packed up and went to Anderson University with the plan of becoming a youth pastor. And there was a whole lot of circumstances that came together that kind of ended that. One was I was kind of living in this duality because I was dealing with some addiction, which I think we're going to get into later. And then 2 was I think I just wasn't spiritually mature, maybe even just mature enough in general to sit in some of those pre-seminary classes. And so I ended up leaving Anderson and came to MTSU. And so I decided, well, I guess ministry is not for me. Went and got a degree in recreation business, and one thing kind of led to another, and I ended up with the YMCA of Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, I remember you working for the YMCA and did a great job and progressed with them. Let me back up just a step though, and say it. You know, I've seen so many preachers' kids who do that, who go to a church school or a Christian college, and then kind of maybe have that awareness of I'm not as spiritually mature as I thought I was. And I wonder if, Brad, it's sometimes we just assume so much about preacher's kid. Well, he's a preacher's kid. He's right with God. He knows the Pentateuch. He's right. You know, we put so much on them and assume so much, and then they feel obligated to take that on, that when all of a sudden they're in some place where they're forced to actually live out that faith, it hasn't been their faith at all.
Yeah.
It's been this kind of ascribed faith from parishioners or even from parents. Do you think?
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that there's an expectation on preachers' kids that you're either going to be dealing drugs,
Yeah.
or you're going to be the next senior
Yeah.
pastor of your father's church. There is no
Right.
middle ground.
Right.
And so I think that's goes back to one of the reasons that we connected so well with your family, because you knew Jared and I are just kids.
Yeah,
We're just
right.
kids. You didn't put those expectations on us. And we definitely dealt with that. I mean, I remember families. There was one family in particular that I remember left the church because me and their son got into a fist fight in the basketball gym, and it was like the preacher's son, got into a fight with my kids, so they left the church. And that expectation is definitely real,
Right.
And it's something that now, having my own kids, I want to be really aware of that my kids don't sense that, because you can begin to kind of develop some even disdain for the church in some regards when you grow up in it.
Yeah, that's good. And it does seem like that maybe that's relaxed a little bit. Maybe we've learned some of our lessons and don't force that on quite as much. So you go into the Parks and Recreation field. You're working at the YMCA, doing a great job. You were among other things, you were a lifeguard.
I was, and that was really where I got my kind of start within the YMCA. I had always worked in city aquatics. I was finishing my senior year recreation business, and there was a girl that was in one of my classes, and she worked for the YMCA that's in Smyrna, Tennessee. And she said, "Hey, we have an opening for our lead aquatics position. You should consider applying for it." And so I did. And to be honest, I didn't think there was any chance they were going to give me this job. And so I went in there. I'm cutting up with all the people. This one guy in particular, he and I just really hit it off, and we're kind of making jokes during the interview. Come to find out, he was the senior vice president. I had no idea. And so he loved me. And so I was when this is true, they called and offered me the job. I said, "Do you have the right person on the phone?" This is Brad White. I just want to make sure. He said, "Absolutely, man. We're excited about you coming in." So I came in and got to kind of jump in my first real role of major leadership. And I learned a ton and had a great support staff underneath me. And I had great leadership above me. And I was really grateful for Gary Cobb was his name. Gary became a mentor and a great friend, and he just poured into me, and he kept giving me opportunities to grow. And eventually there was a tragedy that took place in one of the Ys in Nashville where a young boy drowned. And when that young boy drowned, it really changed the trajectory of my career, because aquatics became this spotlight. They wanted to see who kind of had their ducks in a row, who had been doing the things that we were supposed to be doing. And there was a small group of us that were doing the right things. And so we switched over companies that were doing the certifications. This new company came in, and I excelled in that because of my background in swimming and just being involved in aquatics really my whole life. I ended up being hired by that company as well. And so I started teaching all over the country for Disney's and Six Flags and Dollywood, and getting to teach at some pretty big arenas for the aquatics world. And at the same time, the COO of the Middle Tennessee YMCAs, who was in Nashville, his name is Mike Helbron. He's retired now, amazing guy. He, for whatever reason, took me under his wing, and he said, "Hey, I want to mentor you." And so I started being mentored by Mike. Eventually, they moved me to the downtown Y, and they put me in an operations role where I was essentially the vice principal. Got to deal with all the troublemakers in the building and people who were upset about different things. But that was a sweet season, because the guy that was my direct supervisor, Kenny Alonzo, he's now the CEO of Rocketown, downtown Nashville, Michael W. Smith's
Oh, is that
ministry.
right? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Incredible man of God, ordained minister. And so he and I would talk life, faith, and leadership, and he just poured so much into me. And so I was just growing and learning, and really at that point had decided I'm going to be a Urban 30 Group COO of a YMCA. I want to run one of these larger Ys one day. And so that was kind of where my story in my mind started to take a little bit of a shift from a point where I ended up in the church, because I was convinced this YMCA thing is where we're going. And long story short, I had some incredible opportunities, and God, through Sweet Holly, my wife, made it abundantly clear that I wasn't supposed to take either one of these jobs. And 8 months later, I ended up at the church.
Yeah. Isn't that neat? And we're going to talk about how you kind of had to start down that path in order to go down this path. But so you and Holly were married by that time.
Yeah, we had gotten married in 2008. We had an incredible premarital counseling. If you remember, you did our premarital counseling.
Absolutely. I still one of the few that worked, so that's good.
Yeah, we're doing great. And during that season of getting married, there was this kind of underlying hidden sin of pornography addiction that really plays into the whole story, where I was kind of walking in this secret sin, and eventually I came to the place of, man, the Lord just let me feel the conviction from it, and I wanted freedom from it. And I went forward at church one day and asked to be prayed over and work through some deep rooted issues that were there that I hadn't dealt with, and began to serve in the church in a different capacity. And that was the point. I would say I was saved when I was 7, but I would say that my sanctification process started when I was 22.
Yeah.
And so I began to just serve the Lord and seek the Lord, and I felt the Lord telling me, hey, something's about to change.
Right.
And when these 2 YMCA jobs came up, I thought, well, this is it, right? Because this lines up with everything I've been learning and how I've been almost groomed to take one of these higher level positions. And sweet Holly, she's just kind of along for the ride. I hadn't really sought her input. I'm just kind of like, this is my dream and this is what I want to accomplish. And you're kind of along for the ride. And Pastor Brady called me. I was not working for the church. And he said, listen, I've heard that you're potentially moving. And I said, yeah, we are. He said, I just couldn't let you leave without telling you your name comes up here all the time. And it's like,
wow.
What does that even mean? Is there a job? He said, I don't have a job to offer you. I just had to tell you that. And so I got back from that meeting, and Holly said, what did Pastor Brady want? I said, he just wanted to pray for us. I didn't tell her.
I'm not telling
any of the
that.
other stuff. And so we had gone to North Carolina, had gotten offered the position, went down to Alabama, had been offered the position. And we're sitting at Bonefish Grill. And I said to her, where are we going? And she looked at me and she started crying, and she said, when are you going to stop fighting the call of ministry on your life?
Wow.
And I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Why'd you have to say that? Everything was going so good, because the job in North Carolina came with a house, it came with a car, and management of a golf course. I was like, this is sweet. It's everything that I could have written down on a board for kind of my dreams and visions. And so something inside of my spirit, probably the Holy Spirit, when she said that, just resonated so deep in me, and I knew she was right. And I turned both of those jobs down. And then 8 months later, just sitting and waiting on the Lord, I felt abandoned, honestly, by the Lord. Like, you forgot about me.
Yeah.
The church called me, and they initially brought me in to run guest services and kind of operational stuff. So I was helping with safety and security and moving people and some logistical type things.
Right.
And so did that it was about 1.5 years, 2 years. We opened our Buchanan campus. The men's pastor became the campus pastor. Pastor Brady said, hey, can you just kind of oversee men's ministry, just handle the logistics? So there was one week that I couldn't find any of the pastors to speak. And he said, well, I guess you're going to speak. I was like, I don't speak. And he said, no, you're going to this week.
Yeah.
And so I gave that first sermon I ever gave to an empty room 35 times.
Is that right?
35
I'm
times.
going to practice it. Yeah.
I had it memorized. Absolutely
great,
cold.
Brett. Yeah.
So he called me into his office the next week after the message, and he said, hey, I had your message recorded. And I thought, well, this is it. Time to pack the bags. I'm out of here. And he said, I've been watching you work for the past 1.5 years, and I listened to your message. And he said, I think God's calling you into pastoral ministry.
That's neat.
And so we began the process of ordination. And from there, I got to go through ordination. They invited my dad to come, which was one of the sweetest, the sweetest things. He was in there when they ordained me.
Your dad by this time had moved to Kentucky. He's
in
pastoring
Kentucky.
in Kentucky. Yeah.
He's in Kentucky. And they gave me the chance to go and do some school after that. And so kind of the rest has been just a journey of what does God want to do? People ask me often, like, what are you going to do next? What do you want to do? I'm like, I didn't plan to do this. When I was trying to plan my life out, it didn't work out. And so I've given up on making any plans for my future. I'm just hanging out. And if God says do this, then I'll do it.
That's neat. That's neat. Well, I started with that quote that I love from T.S. Eliot about returning home for the very first time. And there's so many times in your story that I see you walk into a place and you're home. You're finally home. It just happens to be the first time you've ever been there.
Yeah.
And so God was preparing you all along. That's neat. It's also neat that it's important for us to hear, he uses our spouses, most of the time our wives, to be much more in tune and much smarter than we are. And there's been lots of times where Doris has either protected me from some really bad decision or pointed me to some really good decision that I had no idea about. So
I agree wholeheartedly with that.
That's great. Yeah. So now you serve as men's ministry, associate pastor. What do you do? What's your main role?
So two main job titles. Men's ministry is really overseeing all of our men's groups. We have 56 different men's groups that meet throughout the week. We have a Tuesday group. We have Wednesday mornings at 6 a.m., Wednesday nights at 6 p.m., and then we have some Sunday groups. So the bulk of my week during the semester is I'm teaching, and then the groups will break off into smaller groups, and they'll talk through the text that we're working through. And so I just get to love on leaders. I have a kind of a core leadership group.
Yeah, that's
I
great.
spend my time with them, and then they spend their time with the direct leaders underneath, who spend time with all the men who are in
people, yeah.
men's ministry. So this past year, we had over 1,100 individual guys come through men's ministry
Wow.
at some point. So it's really exciting ministry to get
Yeah.
to be a part of, for sure.
And I love that core value of challenging men.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to be sexist. No offense to women, but great churches are only made great if they have great men in them.
Yeah.
If they really reach their men.
And we are so serious about that, because what we've seen statistically speaking is that if you are able to get the man, the family's going to follow. If a man comes to faith in Christ, I think it's a 97% chance that the rest of the family's going to fall in that decision, where with the woman, it's 73%, and with a child, it's 36%.
Yeah.
So I think the most important work that we can do is to pursue the heart of men. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's challenging. With women's ministry, I joke that you could say, hey, we're just going to gather together and we're going to sing Kumbaya.
Yeah.
And you're going to have 1,000 women show up.
Right.
With men's ministry, I mean, you could have Evel Knievel come in and do all sorts of stuff, and you're going to have 12 guys.
Right.
It's just hard. It's just harder
Yeah.
work. So
Yeah.
that's one side of my job. The other side of my job is the associate pastor side, which is really just coming alongside Pastor Brady and helping him. So I oversee the weddings and the funerals that come through the building. I get to help with a lot of premarital counseling, which I love that. It's so much fun.
Neat.
We have a different service that meets at 9:40 called The Gathering at 9:40, and I'm in that service each week. And then I have the chance to work on our sermon writing team, and so I work on kind of where we're going as a church. And once a blue moon, probably 4 or 5 times a year, I get the chance to speak on Sunday mornings when Pastor Brady and Pastor David are out. So I love those opportunities when they come.
That is such a great story, Brad. And, a lot of it I know, but a lot of it I didn't know. And so it's fun to kind of hear how God was directing you. And I don't want to be an I told you so kind of person, but I will say when you were in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade and we were watching you grow up, we were some of those who stood in the background and said, he's going to be a minister someday. He's going to be in the ministry. So I'm grateful for your time in the YMCA, but we all knew that was not going to last. We knew God was taking you someplace else. So that's neat. That's good. And I don't have to tell you this, but what a great church. I mean, New Vision. I'm going to tell a quick little story. My parents, my mother and stepfather, my parents divorced, but my mother and stepfather attended that church, and they were little old non-contributing people. I mean, they didn't have anything to offer, probably a pain in the neck. You and I both have pastored people that, when you see the little lady walking up on Sunday morning, think, oh, brother, here we go again. Well, that was my mom. But, she got sick while she was attending there, and her at first Sunday school class and then eventually became life group, she was in the hospital for months, and never a week, many times not a day would go by that she wasn't connected to the church and visited and prayed for. And then I'll never forget the night that she died. I'm standing in a parking lot at Baptist Hospital in Nashville, and Pastor Brady Cooper called me and said, hey, Mike, I just heard your mom died, and I'm so sorry. I want to pray with you. And so for me, it has been the paragon of what good pastoral care should look like from a church. And I have touted the New Vision story every place I go about what a wonderful job they did of taking care.
And that was the experience that Holly and I had. We were kind of planning on doing a little church shopping once we got married. We went to New Vision the first week, and we didn't make it to any other churches on our list. We camped there, and we were there for 10 years before I came on staff. And, I had obviously grown up as a PK, thought, what's it going to be like to get behind the curtain here?
Right.
And it's made me love the place more.
Yeah.
Because the people are so genuine and authentic, and it's a real, raw, authentic place where we just want to pursue the heart of God. And that's what I've seen even more being totally behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, but that's also a sad thing that you would have to have that thought.
Yep.
But we who grew up as preachers' kids, we do. Okay, this is not the whole story.
Right.
That's the whole story. That's neat. So, well, okay. It's been a great story. God blessed you and gave you a great career, then made a great minister out of you and given you a beautiful family. And so, all right. Thanks for coming, Brad. That's all we have time for. I appreciate you being here today.
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah, there's always that other piece in it. And you know what? The other piece is not more important. It's not even as important. But the other piece, I think, gives context to the beautiful thing that God has done. It's somehow made more beautiful when we know the other piece. So tell me a little bit about that. Let me back up and say, you brought up the fact that by the way, thank you for making me feel so old, but that I did premarital counseling.
We're coming up on 18
guys.
years.
Wow.
By the way.
And what a privilege to do that. What a joy to do that. But I do have kind of this standard thing that I say that I'm not going to get into your sexual behavior. I'm not going to talk about all this stuff. I've got some books you can read. But I am telling you right now, in anticipation of the wedding, stop whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And keep yourself pure and clean until the wedding night.
Yeah.
I say that to nearly everybody that I talk to. In your case, when I said that, you had kind of a different thought. You kind of gulped in a different way.
Yeah, and there was the natural gulp of like, absolutely, Holly and I were, having trouble, keeping our hands off of each other. Sure, that was the obvious side. But the other side for me was, I'm walking in this pornography addiction that Holly doesn't know about. And I assumed you didn't know, but I thought, oh gosh, the Holy Spirit whispered that to Mike, and now I've been busted.
You've been outed, yeah.
I mean, this was a thing. Like, I've got to go way back. I remember the first time I was exposed to pornography. I was in 4th grade, and to this day, I can still recall the exact image that I saw.
Isn't that interesting?
A buddy took me up to his dad's barn loft, and he's like, "Hey, have you ever seen this?" And he showed me a Playboy.
Yeah.
And I remember the way that it made me feel. I liken it to the old video game Mortal Kombat. You had Scorpion, and he'd throw the thing out and pull people over. That's what it did to me.
Yeah.
It grabbed me. It was like a grappling hook went into my soul. And I knew it was wrong. I knew it wasn't right. But at the same time, man, it was just like, this is so intriguing. And this began this process for me of being exposed to pornography. My house was locked down like Fort Knox, and my dad was too cheap for us to have good internet, so there was no opportunity there.
We weren't particularly spiritual. We were just poor.
We were just poor. But down the street, man, there was a couple kids that, man, it was just free reign, full access. And so by the time I was in 6th grade, I mean, I was going to kids' houses, and like that was what we were going to do, was just watch pornography. And I don't know how it affected them, but for me, it was something that became an addiction.
Yeah.
And as I've had some time to grow up and mature and sit back on my story and sit in counseling, I've realized that there's one point that's really a catalyst moment where I can point back to and say, man, this was definitely a problem, was when I was in 8th grade. I was a decent athlete. I wasn't like unbelievable. I was decent. I started on the middle school basketball team, and we had an awards banquet. And that night, we're eagerly anticipating, this process of being given awards. And I'm thinking, for sure I'm getting an award because I'm one of the starting 5. And so the first 4 get called up and they get their award. So now it's my turn, and I'm ready to go up and get my award. And the coach picked the 6th man. And I didn't get one of the awards. And I remember that my solution to the hurt that I was feeling was I had hidden a magazine in my room, and it was like up underneath my drawer. It was a Sports Illustrated swimsuit magazine. Me and my brother knew when the issue came. Mom put it in the trash. We dug out the trash. And so I had that hidden inside of my drawer. And I went to that to bring comfort to myself. And like as an 8th grade boy, I wasn't thinking, well, that's a coping mechanism.
Right.
But now as an adult, I'm like, man,
you recognize.
100%, like that's what I went to. And so I was living in this duality of, I was saved. I was in a church where I was serving. My dad was the senior pastor, and I sang quite a bit. And so I was singing, I was playing drums some, I was involved in worship services. At the same time though, I'm living out this other secret life that no one knows about. No one knows the pull that pornography has on me. And it just continued to progress. And it reached a point where it really became unmanageable when I went to college, when I went to Anderson University.
Okay, right.
Because it was the first time in my life I had my own computer and I had high-speed internet access. And this was, really the time of the dawn of the internet. And to be able to have access to pornography sites at any time of the day, all day long, just shut your door and you're by yourself, was a real issue for me. So
one of the things I say often to people is that our addiction is not geographical. So it doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to go to this Christian college and then I'll be safe from this. No, we take it with us wherever we go.
Yeah,
So.
and honestly, the Christian college made it worse.
Yeah.
It really did, because it provided me more access. And so I was at Anderson for 2 years, came back to MTSU, started working on the recreation degree. That's when Holly and I started dating. And all along, she has no idea about any of this. I'm living on my own. I mean, pornography is something I'm going to regularly. And then we come to this point where, man, we're probably headed towards marriage.
Right.
And I remember one night realizing that I loved her. This clear thought of, I love this girl. And I'd never been in love before. And the next thought that came was, I'm convinced it was the voice of the enemy was like, you're going to ruin this.
Yeah.
And it was the thought of pornography. And I walked out on her balcony and I began to physically throw up. And this brought me into a season of severe panic attacks and anxiety. All I've now realized rooted in this double identity.
Secret sin.
The secret
Can't
sin.
confess it.
Can't confess it. Feel like it's going to come out at some point.
Right.
But if it comes out, I'm probably going to lose this first person that I've ever
matters.
loved.
Right.
And so I continue to carry it and bury it and hide it and delete histories and do everything that I can to make sure that nobody finds out about it. And so we're engaged. We'd gone through premarital counseling. We're getting close to getting married. We went to the Passion Conference, which is a conference for college students, and they had a breakout opportunity. There was all these different classes you could go to, and I saw this breakout on the list, and I'm like, okay, how can I get to this breakout without anyone knowing? So I excused myself, and I went to a breakout for XXX Church, which was at the time kind of the biggest group that was working
the go-to,
within pornography. And so it's a bunch of dudes that love the Lord, and part of their ministry was they were going into porn conventions and loving on porn stars, but then they also had some accountability software.
Right.
And so I wanted to know what they had to say, because this was the world I was living in, like pornography, and I'm a Christian. So I wanted to know. And I'll never forget, Mike, I walked in and Craig Gross, the founder of XXX Church, he's on a stage and he's speaking, and he says verbatim, there are some of you in here today that are struggling with a pornography addiction, and you're engaged, and you think that when you get married, pornography is not going to be an issue, and like pinned me. I'm like, amen, brother. Like that's me, because in my mind, once I get married, like,
I can have sex. I don't have to do that.
Sex twice a day, like it's everything that I've imagined. It's
there are
gonna
a
be.
lot of lies wrapped up in that.
So I remember hearing him say that, and my thought was, idiot, like.
Right.
This guy doesn't know. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know that I'm going to be able to turn this switch off and everything's going to be good. And so December 13th, 2008 comes and goes, and man, we're married and everything's good for the first 3 months. It was great. I didn't look at a computer. I didn't look at anything. Everything's awesome. Well, sure enough, 3.5 months comes, and there I am back in front of a computer screen, watching pornography. Except this time, the shame that I was feeling was even deeper, because I had made this covenant to God with Holly in front of friends and family and vowing to be this person. And I'm already in 3.5 months not being the person I said I was going to be. And man, it just got to a place where it became unmanageable, that anytime I was hungry, angry, lonely, tired, upset, needing justification, needing validation, that was what I was going to. And I talked a little bit about the drowning that had taken place within the YMCA. And when that happened and that other company came in, I got hired on by that company, and I started traveling all over the place. And what I found is that traveling only made it worse for me, because I was in a situation where I had some autonomy. Nobody really knew me. And it's interesting that if you pay attention, airports, typically close to an airport or where a car rental will be, there's either going to be a strip club or there's going to be an adult bookstore.
Right.
And so I found myself in places I swore I would never go. I found myself doing things that I swore I would never do. And one day, I can explain it in really no other way than this. I had acted out, and I went into the bathroom to take a shower, and it was like the Lord opened the floodgates and just let me feel the weight of the sin in a way that I never had. And I remember just falling on my face. I physically could not get up. I was so overcome with shame. I was so overcome with conviction, which is good. I was so tired of being two different people.
Right.
And I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't care what the cost is. I can't continue to carry this burden. So my first call was to the Reverend Jeff White. I called my dad.
Good.
And I said, Dad, I got to tell you something. I'm crying. Through the tears, I told him, I'm addicted to pornography.
Right.
And I've been addicted to pornography since I was probably 10. And he's crying with me. And he's like, man, you need some support. You need some accountability. You need some guys in your corner. And I said, I've got to tell Holly. And he's like, well, I'm going to pray for you, if you feel like that's what you need to do right now. And there's probably a better way to handle that in hindsight. But for me, it was like, I have this burden and I have to let it go right now. And so at the time, Holly was teaching for the county schools. I got cleaned up. I drove to her school and I walked into her classroom. Didn't know the classroom schedule. God in his provision allowed me to show up right when she had just dropped her kids off to a special area. Because I don't know what I was thinking doing that, but it was like I just had to get this off.
In front of 25 second graders, I'm going to do.
That's exactly right. And so I walk in and she's like, why are you here? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I walked in and I sat down at her desk and I put my hands on my head and I started crying and I said, I've got to tell you something. I'm addicted to pornography. And I think I was expecting her to take a ring off, to smack me in the back of the head, start yelling, screaming, whatever. And that's not what happened. What happened was Holly reached her arms around me from behind and she kissed the back of my head and she said, how can I help you? Oh,
wow.
And it was like in that moment, I realized like pornography can't ever love me back.
Right.
It can't. It's empty. And so this began a process of me saying, I need some help and being honest with myself and being honest with others around me. And so I didn't know what to do. I hadn't really ever heard anybody kind of talk about it. And so one day at New Vision, Pastor Brady alluded to, what were you watching last night on the computer or something like, never said pornography, but just kind of threw it out there. Those that were struggling, they got it. And so after the service, I went up to him, and this was one of the first times I remember ever talking to Pastor Brady. And I said, listen, you mentioned this, and this is real for me. I've just kind of come public with my wife and confessed this, and I need some help. And he said, well, maybe meet with one of our staff and see if they can help you. And so I go and meet with this guy, and to my surprise, he goes, well, I don't really struggle with that. And I was like, oh, well, I feel like a complete loser now.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. And so he says, well, why don't you start a group? And so I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is what the Bible's talking about when it says the blind leading the blind. But that's what I did. I didn't know any better. And so I started a group in my house and I started just inviting people. We went through every man's battle. We watched the videos, we talked about it. And this began this journey for me of sharing my story and being really open with it. And like, I'm not ashamed of it.
Right.
It's something that God has done a work in my life. And so as I began to be more willing to share about it, the church started sending me people. It was like, hey, this guy has a problem with pornography. Can you meet with him and talk to him? And so I think that was kind of how I got on the church's radar, was just being a guy who was willing to talk about pornography and sexual sin.
Yeah, that's great, Brad. Wow. Yeah. One of the neat things about that story that is kind of contradictory to the way that it normally happens, though, is you being able to call your dad and talk to your dad about that. Very often, number one, either our dads are caught up in that, or we have no relationship with our dad, or there's a father wound. So praise God for that little bit of heaven in that moment, that even in the midst of this darkest thing, I can call my dad and talk about that. So that's great. So you confess to Holly. Now you've told Pastor Brady. You tell your dad, and so it just absolutely everything goes away, and you're completely healed, and glory, hallelujah.
Definitely not. That's definitely not how it happened. I think in my mind I thought, now that I've told somebody, this desire is going to go away, but I've since done a lot of research and a lot of studying and understanding that, man, this is something that is affecting my brain and my neural pathways, and it's really become hardwired into the way that I think. And it's a default for me that when something happens that's frustrating or traumatic, like, this is what I want to go to because I'm going to get that dopamine relief. And so for me, it became a process of having to get some accountability, having to have some other guys who were in my corner, willing to walk with me, talk with me, share honestly with me, and me to share honestly with them. That was step one. But then also accountability to my devices, right? Because I'm being accessed.
Yeah.
I'm receiving access in some way, shape, or form. And so For me, it was putting some software on my computers. It was getting rid of some devices because I came to realize like either I'm controlling my phone or my tablet or my computer, or on the other side of that, it's controlling me.
Right. Good.
And there was definitely some of those things that was like, no, this is actually controlling me. I think one of the biggest things early on was realizing that there were certain times that I just seemed to be falling to the sin. And that time for me was Wednesday mornings between 8 a.m. and 12 in the afternoon, because I worked a late night shift at the Y. Holly was already headed to school. She's gone. I'm by myself. And so I would be bored and I might get on the computer to do something that is harmless and fine. All of a sudden you're clicking, and then you're somewhere that you didn't want to be.
Yeah.
And so I made this commitment with my accountability person that Wednesdays from 8 to 12, I was going to do something else. And so interestingly enough, I decided to take up fishing. And so I would watch YouTube videos on Tuesday nights of how to fish. And then on Wednesdays, I would go down to the river and fish. And the funniest thing, one day I'm out there and I'm fishing, and all of a sudden I feel like something on the other end of the pole. I never caught anything. And I catch this fish, and then I'm like, I never watched a video on how to take a fish off. And so I made some sashimi on the side of the side of the greenway that day. But it's been funny because now fishing is like one of my favorite hobbies.
Isn't that neat?
I absolutely love to fish, and really fishing started for me so that I was doing something positive and productive instead of just sitting in isolation.
That's neat. We, a little bit of my story, and we've talked about tennis. Tennis is that for me.
Yeah.
I started playing tennis as I entered into recovery, and every once in a while I think, well, why do I love tennis so much? And I realize I love it because it's so deeply ingrained with my own recovery and all of that.
Yeah.
Another important step that you've pointed out, Brad, when we work with people, one of the first things I do is ask men to write out their ritual. Wednesday mornings, I'm home all alone. That's when this happens. I always say, if that's true, by the time it's Wednesday at 10 o'clock and I'm looking at YouTube videos, I'm gone. I'm too far along.
Absolutely.
So I need Tuesday night, I need to pull up the fishing videos and say, here's how I'm going to stop this. So good. So good.
I liken that to if I said, hey, Mike, I'm going to be at your front door at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and I'm going to punch you when you walk out the door.
Yeah.
And then I punch you at 9 a.m., you're like, why'd you punch me? I said, well, I told you I was going to be here.
Right.
And then the next day I say, I'm going to be back at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And then the same thing happens.
Right.
By the third day, hopefully you're coming out with a helmet on, you're doing something different. You're not going to walk through the same pattern when you're getting punched every single time.
Or I'm going to leave the house at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. So I realized, man, I'm getting punched every single Wednesday. So if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, as Jeff White would say.
That's good.
So.
Yes, that's right. Our fathers got so much smarter when we got a little older, didn't they?
Man, I'm telling you.
That's neat. So good. So God has continued that process, and I appreciate you saying that so much. I believe there's absolute miraculous healing, and God in an instant can change things. But there's also that process, and I continue to learn more about accountability software. I continue to be involved in groups, to read books, to do all of those things. So good for you, Brad.
To this day, I still have accountability software on my phone. I have Covenant Eyes. If somebody's looking for a great software, that would be the one that I would recommend. $20 a month, and my dad is getting screenshots of what I'm looking at, and my buddy Brad is getting screenshots of what I'm looking at, because I don't want to be in a situation where that temptation comes and I have access. So Craig Rochelle, who's a pretty well-known pastor, he says, why deal with temptation in the future if you can eliminate it today?
Yes, absolutely.
And so for me, Covenant Eyes has been a way that I can eliminate that temptation now before I ever walk through the doors of it.
Yeah. And so in your work with men now and your work at the church, I'm sure this is a very big part of what you do, of helping men to put some things in place to overcome addictions. And
it's weekly. I mean, it's a weekly conversation that I meet with a guy. And what I found is, and I'm sure you would agree with this, that for most of these men, I become the first person that they've disclosed this to.
Yeah.
And there's really two categories. I think there's the guy who has been caught and his wife has sent him to the church, or there's the guy who's just come to a point of like, I can't keep doing this. And my preference is the guy who says, I can't keep doing this. Because he's come to a place of really hating his sin and seeing it for what it is, and he wants to pursue the holiness of Christ. The guy who got in trouble, he just wants to get back on his wife's good side. And he might realize that it's a problem, but what I've realized in working with guys, and I'm sure you would agree with this, that until a guy says, man, I see this as sin and I hate this,
Yeah.
then he's not ready to do the work that's required.
Yeah, I agree. I've said if I could create a pill that you could give a guy and make him hate his sin,
You're good.
we'd make $1 million. So that's it. Brad, wow, what a great thing. Well, it's interesting to me that I come up with these wild-eyed thoughts of what this is going to be about, and God in his grace makes it about that. But God was at work on you when you were a 10-year-old boy, about the time that you and Jacob are sitting there talking, that God was leading you through some dark days,
Yeah.
preparing you for really what is the most significant thing you'll ever do in your life, is reach men and deliver them from that. Wow, Brad, what a great story. Thank you for your courage to tell that. And I know you know this, but one of my favorite sayings is every time we tell our story, our shame is cut in half. It keeps me clean and sober by telling the story over and over again. But how God has used that, just been so neat. Let me ask you before we go. I always hate when people ask me, well, give me 3 little points, but I'm going to do it anyway. 3, what would you say if you could go back and talk to 10, 11, 12-year-old Brad and say, don't do this, don't go down that path?
Yeah.
What kinds of things, and maybe I'm thinking also parents who have 10, 12-year-old boys that they think, oh, they're fine. Sure. What's some things you could say to help them?
Well, I've been in this situation. I have a 15-year-old son.
Yeah.
And so I've navigated these waters. And I think one of the things that there's so much research around now is the age of exposure. It's getting lower and lower. I think the average age of exposure is 7 or 8 now.
Wow.
Because of technology.
Right.
And so we have had the conversations with our kids, and we had the conversations with our kids early and age appropriate. So there's a great book for parents called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and that's for your kids that are 5, 6, 7. And then really with Cade, we went through a book called Guy Stuff, and it really just talks about pre-puberty, but then walking through that and explaining God's design for sex, and then explaining how pornography is really this deviation that Satan manipulated this good gift that God has given us.
Good.
And so what I tell young guys and old guys too is it's like a fire. Sex is like a fire. You've heard it before, that when it's out in a field and it's loose, man, it's dangerous and it wreaks havoc. But inside of the fireplace, within God's design, within the way that God has given it to us, it is this beautiful and wonderful gift, and it's worth waiting for. It's not a don't do it, it's a wait and do it right.
Yeah, that's good, Brad.
Yeah.
It's really good. Well, the other side of that, though, the guy that says, oh, man, I'm 55 years old, I wish I'd talked to you when I was 15.
Yeah.
What do I do now? I've tried, I can't quit. What do I do now?
Yeah, you're never too far gone, right?
Yeah,
God's grace is enough. I think first and foremost, you've got to be able to admit it to yourself that this is an issue, that this is a problem, this is something that's controlling me, it's not honoring to God. Number 2 is admitting it to someone that is a close friend, someone that's a mentor, to get some accountability, because accountability is something that is so key for walking with a pornography addiction.
Right.
If you try to do this on your own, and I tried on my own without accountability, you're going to end up back in front of your computer or your phone within weeks or months. And so having that accountability in person, and then having some accountability to your devices. And so putting the XXX Church or the Covenant Eyes software on there, or maybe even saying, gosh, maybe I should just get a flip phone.
Yeah.
So I think making some decisions to set yourself up best for success. And then I had this idea that I've kind of thought out and put some time into, is this idea of mapping. And it's really saying, like, when am I falling? When am I getting punched in the face? And making a plan for those times when I continue to fall to that same sin, because sin seems to be, in my life anyway, it's been very habitual, and it seems to have happened in the same way on the same day at the same time. And so having a plan for those times when the pressure is going to come, because if I go into my Wednesday without a plan, I'm set up for failure.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
Brad has written a great book called The Little Book About the Big Lie of Pornography.
Yeah.
It's available on Amazon. I'm sure you can get it from him. We actually will put in show notes both of these books that he just mentioned, and also Brad's book. And I'd encourage you to get those, follow up on those. Well, here we are, full circle, back home for the very first time. I feel like I have sat down with an old friend and found out all kinds of new things about him, and so met him for the first time again. And that's what God is doing in our lives. Never be surprised at the things that you went through in the early days of your life that God brings around full circle to be some of the greatest blessings in your life. And never imagine that God is finished with you, that he can't do something with you. He's still bringing you back home again. And when you get there, you'll realize you were there for the very first time. Thank you so much for being a part of this. This is Extending Branches. It's a podcast that we do regularly to help you have a better understanding of how to live happier, healthier, and holier lives. If you like what you see here, we encourage you to go to the Branches website and follow up there. We'd also like you to like, click, subscribe, share, whatever those things are that you're supposed to do. We are glad that you're a part of this conversation, especially glad to have this conversation with my friend Brad White. We believe that God has said to us, he's the vine. If we remain in him, our life will be full. Our desire then is to extend that branch to you. God bless you. Have a great day.